Welcome to your 2023 Ironman Florida course preview. The swim course for the 2023 Ironman Florida is as followed. It features crystal clear water. Athletes will begin their journey in the Gulf of Mexico for this two-loop swim around Russell Fields Pier. You'll have a short beach run between your two laps. There are strong currents, riptides, occasional marine life that are possible to see. A universal flag system is used locally. The swim course in a clockwise direction and water temperatures typically in the low 70s, making it wetsuit legal. Once it's complete, athletes will run up the beach under a freshwater shower before entering transition. Wendy, you have done this course. How challenging is it to go from the beach into an ocean water swim, specifically there in the Gulf of Mexico?
I wouldn't say there's any challenge in going from a beach to the swim. It's shallow. So as you run from the sand into the water, you're still going to be running and you're either going to fall and start swimming like I usually do. I usually start swimming pretty quickly. And athletes who aren't trying as much as I am for speed wise, they might just kind of walk out and wait till the water gets over their shoulders before they start swimming. And I would say they're less experienced swimmers. So they're just avoiding it as long as possible. The biggest thing about swimming in the Gulf is the riptides. The year I did the race was in 2021, and there was 500 athletes that did not finish the swim. None of them drowned. They were all okay. They just completed the first loop and they realized there was no way they were going to make the cutoff, which was 2 hours and 20 minutes. Or maybe some of them got pulled because they panicked because it was a really, really tough swim for, again, the less experienced athlete. And so that's a concern that you all should have. I mean, that particular year we had a big cold front move in, and the day before the race was extreme high winds. If those winds were race day, I would not have done the race, and lots of rain. And it was like low 40s, maybe high 30s for a temperature high the day before. So we're talking Florida. That was kind of an extreme case. The weather's not always like that, but that's something you always want to take note of, because a lot of people think Ironman Florida, due to the nature of being a flat bike and flat run course, that it's going to be an easier course. And that year it definitely wasn't because of the weather. The weather, I think, limits every easier type of course to make it a challenge. And for that year was definitely the swim.
Now, how challenging or intimidating is it for some of the first timers who are doing this course when you deal with currents? I know the buoys are out there. They're going to be on your right. But how far out do you go before you can't see the bottom? And how challenging is that for someone who goes, I've never swam in an ocean before. I've always been lake swims or maybe a downriver swim itself, but never in the ocean.
Yeah, I think when you're swimming in the ocean, because of the nature of the current, your stroke may change. So something to do in training is thinking about developing a little bit shorter, choppier stroke so you can manage the current depending on how big it's going to be, how big the waves are going to be, as well as sighting. Sighting becomes a little bit more important because you could sight into, the wave and not see the buoy because of the wave. And so sighting becomes a little bit more important, as well as being strong. This particular race, because it was in the ocean, I focused a little bit more on strength training during the later phases, during the buildup of this race, which heavier strength training more than I normally would do, because I knew strength would be a strength of mine to feel like a strong athlete, so I could battle the elements of any riptide or any waves in my way. And I think a lot of athletes get intimidated because it's not clear, like a clear ocean swim that I've swum in Kona. It's nice, but there are jellyfish. I didn't notice the jellyfish at all. I didn't get stung by any, but I hear stories that people get stung by jellyfish. Sometimes when someone sees a jellyfish or sees some sort of marine life and they never seen it before, it could kind of throw them back. Like they're like, whoa, what was that? And it could stop them in their tracks. But if you know that kind of stuff is going to be there and you have the opportunity and training maybe to travel to Panama City and swim in the Gulf or somewhere in some other type of ocean leading up to the event, you're going to be more prepared for that marine life.
Clearly in Hawaii, salt water, same thing with the Gulf of Mexico. What about the clarity as you're out there?
I didn't To me, because of the weather, it was a cloudy day, and I think the water was a little bit darker than what I've seen because of the rip tides and just, the nature of what
Stirs it
all that
up.
wind was stirring it up. Exactly. What it was bringing in, it wasn't that clear. What happened to us was, I was there a week and the water temperature was borderline going to be wetsuit legal. It was in that 75 to 76 degree range. And if it's above 76.1, if you want to be eligible for prizes, you can't wear a wetsuit. And so it was really borderline. And then overnight, because we had that cold front, I was still leaning towards not wearing a wetsuit until the race morning. And the race morning, the water temperature dropped 5 degrees overnight. So it ended up being high 60s. And luckily I had a wetsuit available for me to wear, and I'm glad I wore it because the air temperature was only like 45. And so there was some cold patches. It was
Mm.
fairly still warm. Like 69 was warm in a wetsuit, but then I hit some very, very cold patches because it was stirring. The waves and the current and the wind was stirring the water. So it was just an unusual swim. It wasn't something I expected when I signed up for Florida, but it is what it was. And with my experience, I was able to adapt, and I had what I needed to um, overcome the riptide. And I had a wetsuit, so I was warm.
The two loop course is not exclusive to Florida, but it's not every race where you get out and go on the beach and then get back into the ocean. Tips, strategies, tactics for first timers or people who are back at this race who have done it for a while.
Um,
How do you get out and get back in again?
you
And what do you do
know,
when you're out?
Yeah. So when I was running, you're running on the sand. That's going to slow you down. I wasn't in any hurry. Like that's not some place where I was trying to make up time because I am a swimmer. So I kind of just conserved my energy and I just jogged that little bit of stretch on the sand. And then again, as soon as I really touched the water, I just dove in and started swimming again because I didn't want to have to run any further than I needed to because I wanted to swim further. And so a lot of athletes will walk that section. There's a lot of spectators, there's a lot of people there. There's help, there's assistance because again, running on the sand, you might trip and fall on something. So there's plenty of volunteers kind of directing you where to go and help you overcome if you happen to struggle the first loop and you need a little bit of a break. That's where you can take a little bit of a break, meaning you need to rest and sit down if you know you're still going to make the 220 cutoff.
And there's that time to take a deep breath, and you're going from horizontal to vertical for 30 seconds or whatever, and then you're going back into the water. For those first timers, maybe assess, take a breath, and reset and go back in.
Right. You may feel a little dizzy. That's normal when you're going from vertical to horizontal. No, when you're going horizontal to vertical, you may feel a little lightheaded at first. That's when you just really just need to slow yourself down. You don't want to dive back into the water if you're feeling dizzy.
And before we get to the bike course preview, there is a bit of a transition from the end of the swim up a little bit of a bank and then through some buildings still out into a parking lot for the bike transition.
Yeah, it's a very long transition. It is
Yeah.
probably one of the longer transitions I've ever done. I don't remember the distance, but it is a long transition. And I wore my wetsuit all the way up to transition. Normally, while I'm running, I'll peel down my wetsuit to my waist until I get in transition and then I'll pull it off. Or there's wetsuit strippers that will help you take your wetsuit off at the end of the swim. Because it was so cold, the air temperature was very cold, I chose to keep my wetsuit on. And then I went into the changing tent and I did a complete change. I took my swimsuit off and I put my dry kit on before I got on the bike.
And from when I covered the race as a reporter, they had freshwater showers to rinse off before you got to
Hmm.
transition.
Right.
Now, your 2023 Ironman Florida bike course. This one loop course is known to be flat and fast as it traverses the intercoastal waterways into Pine Log State Forest. But don't be surprised to face some rolling hills, although the elevation is not anything to write home about. As the day progresses, light winds will challenge you on your return to transition. Expect a fast bike split and be prepared to stay in your air bars nearly the entire time. And that's where you will stay for the majority of your ride. Again, this is one loop and a couple of U-turns along the way. Count a total of 3 U-turns. What is your thoughts on the Ironman Florida bike course?
Yeah. Now, for this particular race, I chose this race to do myself because I had flat terrain to train on. And so You want to make sure, especially when you're about 12 weeks out, that you are riding your longer rides on flat terrain, which are specific to the Ironman course, in your aero bars. You want your shoulders, neck, back to really get comfortable training on the bike with aero bars that you plan to train on. There is one little climb, which is you can't even tell. It's kind of like a false flat. And the year I did it, because we had this extreme headwind, it was quite challenging. And again, it added to the unexpected challenge of the Ironman Florida course is that wind. When it's windy and crosswindy and you're near the ocean, it feels that much worse because there's no protection from buildings or trees or anything like that. So you want to make sure you're really checking the weather and you're updated on what the forecast is going to be race day, because that may change the type of wheels that you use if it's going to be windy on that type of course. And it might just change how long you think you're going to be out there. For me, I know this for every headwind, generally for the most part, there's going to be a tailwind. And so even though this headwind was quite challenging mentally and physically, I just let myself maintain my rate of perceived effort that I planned to. And then when I got to the downhill section, we had this super fast tailwind and I just rode it and it was so much fun. So we had a tailwind most of the last 25-ish miles.
I think the key is there, you said, is to race your race at the effort that you trained at. Don't go any harder because it's a headwind, because you have that tailwind. The monotony of being in your aero bars for that long period of time is not typical because you don't have this many races that, let me double check here on they don't even have an elevation gain listed on this one because it's so low, is planning the day and being aware, maybe have a reminder on your watch or a note somewhere, like, hey, I better hydrate every 20 minutes. I better eat every 30 minutes, whatever it may be. How do you get through that mentally of, I'm in my aero bars the whole time. Is my back seizing up? I mean, I got to be prepared for this.
So for me in this particular race, I ate something every 20 minutes. So it was about every 5 or 6 miles or so, depending on that speed at that time. And I would stand. And so I made sure I had plenty of times where when I would eat, then I would stand just to stretch out the legs, the glutes, the back. And then along that section that we were in headwind going uphill, as much as I didn't want to stand because then it was more resistance with that wind, it's easier to stand when you're climbing. And then I really just enjoyed a nice aero descent with a tailwind. And so, yeah, you do want to get used to that. And it's something that you adjust to in training. You practice saying, okay, every 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever it is for you, that you're going to be able to, stand up for a couple pedal strokes and stretch your shoulders, back, and legs. It's so helpful. It's so beneficial.
Your 2023 Ironman Florida run course, 26.2-mile two-loop course, traverses the coast and features scenic views and vibrant cheering sections. It's one of the flattest run courses on the Ironman circuit. It's filled with breathtaking views of the Emerald Coast waters along the shoreline and capped in dramatic fashion with huge crowds at the spectator-friendly finish line in Pier Park. Again, 2 loops and elevation gain, not much at all, right there along the ocean front. What's your take on the Ironman Florida run course?
In training, make sure you are able to run on a paved bike path / concrete type of terrain to get your body used to that harder surface. Coming from a love of trail running, I had to make myself say, okay, today you're going to do your 16-mile run on the concrete, and then you're going to treat yourself to a 4-mile run on the trails, because I just had to, I'm glad I did that. I had to allow my body to get used to the course specific terrain on flat, tough surface. And I was able to work on my pacing and my nutrition, and I had all that dialed in before the race. So it's it's always beneficial if you can to always train on the terrain that the course is going to provide. For this particular course, it's 2 loops. So it's about a 6.5 mile out, 6.5 mile back. And then you do that again. Very spectator friendly. My family was at the 4.5 mile marker point. That's where our condo was. So they waited for me there. So they got to see me at 4.5 miles. And then they got to see me again at about just 8 miles. And then I ran to the turnaround, and then they got to see me again. And then after they saw me that third time, they got in a car and they met me at the finish line. So, depending on where you're staying, most people will stay along the run course and be able to see their athletes from outside their hotel or condo or home that they're staying at. So it's really nice. I really like the sun setting. I'm a sunset person. And so as you're running later into the evening, you can just watch the sun setting. And it's just a really nice, pretty atmosphere of it getting darker out and being along the shoreline. It does get chilly. So if you're someone who thinks they're going to be out there, past 5, 6 o'clock, you might want to put some clothing like jacket, gloves, a beanie, a hat in your special needs bag so you can pick that up and wear that for, the last 8 miles of the run course.
How would you describe the weather at that time of day in the Ironman race, whether it's the wind, whether it's the sun, heat, humidity?
For me, again, that race day, it was very sunny race day. It was just chilly. So by the time I got on the run course, we're talking, I was running between 3 and 6 p.m. ish, 2 to 6, sometime in the between there. It was 50s, high, maybe 60 at the start, and then it got to be low 50s at the finish. And then for people who are out there in the dark, even with nice weather, it's probably going to be maybe high 40s, low 50s if you're out there, towards, past 9 o'clock. And like any Ironman, I always think that they can provide more light for those athletes who are out there in the dark, just to provide a little bit more guidance, feel like you're not out there alone, because there's a little bit more lighting going on, especially the second half of the run course when you're kind of out that far. But in general, it is flat. It is flat. You're not going to get any incline at all on that run course. So, which to me, it makes it faster. So I really trained for this course. So it was a very fast run for me at that time.